Now, you're quoted as saying it was a very tough decision to expand the zone, but with toxic air leading to around 4,000 premature deaths each year and our children growing up with stunted lungs, it is the right thing to do. Now, when you say it was a tough decision, clearly you had to weigh up the pros and the cons. What was in the pro column and what was in the con column?
Good morning. Well, in the pro column to expand in the ULEZ was looking at the evidence in relation to the consequences of air pollution, and you've summarised some of them. Not just the 4,000 premature deaths, children with stunted lungs forever, adults with a whole host of health issues from asthma to cancer, from heart disease to dementia. But also we know there's a policy that can reduce air pollution, and that policy is the ULEZ. We know that because in central London, we saw a reduction of almost 50% of pollutants, of toxicity, a third fewer children being admitted to hospital with air pollution-related illnesses. When we widened it to inner London, we saw a further reduction of 21% in air pollution. 1,400 schools now breathe in cleaner air, the children that goes to those schools. But the evidence also showed, Asma, that in outer London, there weren't significant improvements, but also the 10 boroughs with the largest amount of premature deaths, all in outer London. 2/3 of Londoners with respiratory issues live in outer London. 24 of the 30 GP practices where patients have the worst respiratory problems, all in outer London. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to expand. But on the other column, I recognised that we are going through a cost of living crisis. I recognise that although the poorest Londoners, least likely to own a car, suffer the worst consequences, some Londoners do need to drive, particularly in outer London. And that's one of the reasons, because I've been listening to the concerns. We've massively improved public transport in outer London, 5 million kilometres of new bus miles. But also, we have the country's biggest ever scrappage scheme without a penny of support from the government. And I've continued to listen.
What about the timing of all of this? The Labour Minister, Justin Matters, said yesterday you should listen to concerned residents, reflect on whether this is really the right time to be going ahead. Now, he's talking about cost of living, which you mentioned there. But Londoners right now, and I count myself as one, I suppose, many Londoners feel that there's a lot going on right now in terms of, I suppose, restrictions is how many of them would see it. Low traffic neighbourhoods, ULEZ, 20-mile-an-hour zones. Can you understand that for some people it's a lot? It feels like a lot at once, and perhaps you could have staggered this a bit more.
Well, we're in danger of conflating a number of different issues, but dealing just with clean air, there are a number of policies I brought in to try and address the public health crisis caused by air pollution. We have more electric buses than any city in Western Europe, more rapid charging points than any city in Western Europe now. We have around a third of the country's electric charging points. But the problem is the air pollution health crisis that's been caused affects the poorest Londoners the most. Around half of our households in London don't own a car. 70% of the poorest Londoners don't own a car, yet they suffer from what I'm talking about, the asthma attacks, the stunted lungs, the respiratory issues, the dementia, cancer, and so forth. You know, it costs the NHS between 2017 and 2025 £1.6 billion to treat people with respiratory
but Sadiq
problems.
Khan, I understand your point about conflation, but the point here is looking at it from the kind of angry motorist, the annoyed motorist point of view, and they see all these things, LTNs, ULEZ, 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. I'm not saying they're about clean air necessarily, but they all see these things as restriction on their right to drive, to commute, to run a business, and that's what's annoying some of them. Do you understand that?
I do understand the point you're making. So let me be quite clear. You know, the policy to clean the air in London is not anti-car or anti-motorist. And the good news is actually 9 out of 10 cars seen driving in outer London on an average day, 9 out of 10 are already compliant.
Sure.
So there is no additional fee for you to pay, no restrictions on you. You benefit from the clean air. But I accept there are a small number of cars that will be affected. They are non-compliant cars. They themselves, the drivers, breathe in the pollutants. And that's why I've announced that every single driver in London of a car, a motorbike, every small business with a van, every charity with a minibus will receive financial support. And by the way, without a penny of support from the government, the reason why I say that, Asma, is it's the government that's published air quality directives. The government has been supporting other cities around the country rightly, but not London.
Can I ask you two very quick questions that listeners have texted in? How many of the 4,000 people who allegedly die due to air quality problems will be saved from the expansion of ULEZ?
Well, so the 4,000 people, around 4,000 people, are premature deaths based upon the same team that did work for the government. And by the way, around the country, it's between 28,000 and 36,000 premature deaths caused by air pollution. And so what we've already seen is some extension of life because of the ULEZ expansion in London and in central London. I mentioned the stat in relation to children being admitted to hospital, a third fewer linked with air pollution. The longer the ULEZ policy is in scheme, the more lives that are saved because the cumulative impact. So in central London, the cumulative impact, almost 50% reduction in nitrogen dioxide. In inner London, after 2 years, the cumulative impact at 21% reduction in air pollution. And over a period of years, you'll see big reduction. The best comparator I can give you, Asma, is in 2006-07, when the government first banned smoking in enclosed public places. You didn't immediately see the health benefit of reduced lung cancer and so forth. It was over a period of time. And all the expert evidence is, both from the UK and around the globe, that reducing air pollution does save lives, does protect children's lungs.
Okay. Do you think that you should have consulted more on this? For example, LTNs, that's something that goes to kind of local consultation. Where I lived previously in Tower Hamlets, I went to consultation and it was incredibly divided. Do you think that there should be more of an element of consultation, or is that what a London mayor does?
So this goes to the core of policies in relation to a number of areas. So we did consult in relation to the ultra-low emission zone, both the central London one, the expansion in London, and the expansion to outer London. And it's because of the concerns raised during the consultation. Even though we had no support from the government, I announced a scrappage scheme, firstly, of £110 million. And because of the responses to the consultation, we focused that money on low-income families, on disabled Londoners, on micro businesses employing less than 10 people, and charities. But even after the consultation, I've continued to listen, which is why I then expanded the scheme to enable every family who receives child benefit. And I've continued to listen, which is why we announced a few weeks ago that every Londoner is now eligible for support who has a non-compliant vehicle. But there's a distinction between consulting, listening and responding and a referendum. And what I've not held is a referendum in relation to this policy. And I think what cities around the country want are mayors elected with a mandate to take action. And I was elected in 2016 and 2021 with a mandate to take action in relation to both air pollution and the climate emergency.
Okay. Now, you've said that a pay-per-mile scheme is not on your agenda, but that was in your transport strategy back in 2018 as something that was being considered. Is that something that you are ruling out forever or just for the time being? So
let me deal with that head on. So I am ruling out a pay-per-mile scheme whilst I'm mayor. It's not on the agenda. It's not on the table. But there's no secret that, the government, transport officials in London and around the country, have been looking at some time in relation to a smarter, streamlined service for a variety of reasons, not least because the government are worried about fuel revenues drying up over the course of the next few years. In fact, Boris Johnson, when he was the mayor of London, remember him? In his transport strategy, there was talk about a pay-per-mile scheme. When Rishi Sunak was Chancellor, he asked his Treasury officials to look into this scheme. So there's no secrecy around this, whether it's TfL, the government, or transport authorities around the country. But I'm quite clear. My focus is the world's biggest clean air zone, even more electric buses, improving public transport even more, particularly in outer London, and making great progress with the policies we have.
Is there one thing that you would have done differently with regards to ULEZ? One thing?
Oh, listen, there's not a day I've gone to bed as mayor, Asma, and I've not had regrets about the day I've had. There's always things I look back on in relation to how we can deal with these things, but I'll continue to try my best to improve as mayor and continue to make sure, I'm confident and bold in relation to the policies that the city that I love needs, but taken on board concerns that, Londoners genuinely have.